Hello and welcome. Today we're talking about our body's single most important line of defense, our skin. It is an incredible, living barrier, but you know what? It's not invincible. We're going to explore what happens when this fortress of ours comes under siege.
But first, let's kick things off with a quick question for you. What do you think is your body's single largest organ?
If you guessed your skin, you are exactly right. It is this vast, living fortress that protects everything inside of us. But like any fortress, it has its weak points. It can be breached, and that's what we're digging into today, the invaders and the battles that rage when our defenses are broken.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at the defenses themselves. Then we're going to take a journey, starting at the surface and going deeper and deeper into the different levels of invasion. We'll meet the main culprits, and hey, they're not all bacteria, and we'll see how these battles can get really, really dangerous. Before finally, we'll talk about how we fight back.
All right, Section 1, our skin, the first defense. So if our skin is such an amazing barrier, you have to wonder, how do these infections even get started in the first place?
Well, it almost always starts with a breach in the wall. Think about it. A simple cut, a scrape, even a skin condition like eczema can open the gate. And once that gate is open, there are always microscopic culprits just waiting for their chance to storm the castle. In the vast majority of these infections, they're caused by two main types of bacteria.
So let's meet our primary antagonists, staph and strep. Now they're both a type of bacteria we call gram-positive cocci, but what's really cool is how their names are a total giveaway of what they look like. Staphylos is actually Greek for bunch of grapes, and you can see it right there. The staph bacteria cluster together just like that. And streptos, that means twisted chain, and sure enough, that's exactly how strep bacteria line up. Go ahead and remember these two shapes because we are going to be seeing a lot of them.
Okay, now let's see what an actual invasion looks like. We're going to start right on the surface, with the kind of infections that a lot of us have probably experienced at some point, the ones that take advantage of those tiny little openings for our hair follicles.
It usually starts small, right? With something called folliculitis, which is basically just an infected pimple. But if that infection manages to push deeper into the next layer of skin called the dermis, it becomes a furuncle, which most of us just call a boil. And if several of those boils merge together, well, then you have a much larger, nastier carbuncle. It's a perfect example of how a really minor breach can escalate if it isn't dealt with.
Okay, time to go a layer deeper. What happens when the infection isn't just contained in a single follicle, but starts to spread across the upper layers of the skin itself?
This brings us to impetigo. It's a super contagious infection of the epidermis. That's the outermost layer of our skin. It's really common, especially in kids. The thing that makes it so recognizable, that telltale sign that doctors always look for, is this very distinctive, thick, honey-colored crust that forms over the sores.
And if we go deeper still, we can get something called cellulitis. The key word to remember here is spreading. So if you think of a boil as a contained battle happening in one spot, cellulitis is way more like a wildfire. The bacteria are just advancing through the deeper tissue, causing a whole area of skin to get red, swollen, and pretty painful.
And now we're heading into much more dangerous territory. The infections we're about to talk about are rare, thank goodness, but they are absolutely life-threatening. This is what happens when the battle moves from the skin down into the deep tissues underneath.
I'm sure you've heard the term flesh-eating bacteria. Well, the medical name for it is necrotizing fasciitis, and it's a truly terrifying example of what our old friend strep is capable of. Its toxins literally digest the fascia. That's the thin connective tissue that surrounds our muscles. A huge red flag for doctors is when the pain is way more intense than what you'd expect just from looking at the skin. And believe me, the stakes here could not be higher.
Yeah, just look at that number. Even with really aggressive medical treatment, the mortality rate is around 20%. This is a true medical emergency.
Another really feared deep tissue infection is gas gangrene. Now, while necrotizing fasciitis digests tissue, this one, which is caused by a bacteria called Clostridium perfringens, actually produces gas bubbles under the skin. But the biggest difference between them is the environment it needs to grow. It thrives where there's no oxygen, which is why you see it most often after really deep, crushing injuries or wounds that haven't been properly cleaned out.
And if you thought that last number was sobering, check this out. Without swift, aggressive treatment, the mortality rate for gas gangrene can be over 40%.
So up to this point, we've been focused completely on bacteria. But you know, they are not the only invaders trying to get past our fortress. So let's take a quick look at some of the viral and fungal attackers.
A lot of us have had chickenpox, right? It's a perfect example of a viral assault on the skin. You can actually see how the infection plays out across the body. It starts as these flat spots, then they become raised bumps, and then you get those classic fluid-filled vesicles that someone once poetically described as teardrops on rose petals, before they finally dry up and crust over.
And then, of course, there are fungi. Ringworm has to be one of the great misnomers of all time. There is no worm, it's a fungus. These types of fungi just love to feed on keratin, which is the tough protein that makes up our skin, our hair, and our nails. And that's exactly why these infections cause annoying things like athlete's foot or that ringworm you can get on your scalp.
Okay, so we've seen the invaders and we've seen the damage they can do. So the big question is, how do we fight back? Let's talk about diagnosis and treatment.
Well, any good battle plan has to start with identifying the enemy. The investigation usually begins with a simple visual exam. Remember that honey-colored crust we talked about? But to be absolutely sure, doctors will take a culture to see exactly what kind of microbe is growing. And for those really deep infections, they might need blood tests or even an MRI to see just how far the enemy forces have advanced.
And once the enemy is identified, that's when you can deploy the right weapons. Sometimes that means a physical attack, like draining an abscess, or in the case of something severe, like necrotizing fasciitis, surgically removing all the dead tissue. Other times, it's more of a chemical assault, using this huge arsenal of antibiotics for bacteria, or very targeted antivirals and antifungals for those other kinds of invaders.
But really, when it comes right down to it, the best fight is the one you never have to have. All these incredible, advanced treatments are really a last resort. The most effective strategy is always going to be prevention. And that means simple, proper wound care, cleaning and protecting any break in your skin. That's our most powerful defense against invasion, period.
Which really just leaves us with a final thought. We walk around inside this incredible biological fortress every single day of our lives. It's constantly protecting us from this barrage of invisible threats. So the real question is, what are we doing to maintain our own defenses? What are we doing to protect the shield that protects us?